Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
It only took one phone call to lose everything. No sirens, no masks, just a voice that sounded exactly like family. Today, we're following the story of Arthur. He thought he was saving his grandson. Instead, he was the target of a professional hacker. In this video, we'll explore the psychological tactics of scammers and learn the specific English phrases you need to protect yourself and your loved ones. From the moment of the first call to the legal battle for recovery, this is a journey of betrayal, learning, and resilience. We have structured this story into 10 chapters to help you master real-life English while navigating a modern social dilemma. Let's dive into Chapter 1, The Ringing Phone. Pay attention to the red flags along the way.
The kitchen was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a wall clock. Arthur sat at the small wooden table, sipping a lukewarm cup of tea. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of repetitive, peaceful day he had earned after 40 years of hard work. Then the silence was shattered. His smartphone vibrated against the tabletop, a harsh sound that seemed too loud for the room. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. "Hello?" he said, his voice steady but curious. "Grandpa, it's me. Please don't tell Mom. I'm in trouble." Arthur's heart skipped a beat. The voice was frantic, muffled by what sounded like static or wind, but it had that familiar rising inflection. "Leo, is that you? What's happened? Where are you?" "I'm at the police station," the voice whispered, followed by a jagged sob. "There was an accident, a car crash. They're saying it was my fault, Grandpa. They've taken my phone and my wallet. I'm using a lawyer's cell. If I don't post bail in the next hour, they're moving me to the county jail." The word bail hit Arthur like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. His mind raced with images of his grandson, a bright college student, locked in a cold cell. The lawyer then took the phone, speaking with a professional, clipped tone. He used words like litigation, negligence, and immediate wire transfer. He told Arthur that because of the legal gray area, the money had to be sent via a digital app to avoid red tape. Arthur felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. He wasn't tech-savvy, and the urgency was suffocating. "How much?" he asked, his hand trembling as he reached for his reading glasses. $15,000, the lawyer replied. "It's the only way to keep his record clean. If you wait until tomorrow, it will be too late." Arthur didn't hesitate. He didn't call Leo's parents. He didn't stop to wonder why the voice sounded slightly metallic. He only thought of the boy who used to sit on his lap and read comic books. Driven by a desperate need to protect his family, Arthur opened his banking app, guided by the calm, predatory voice on the other end of the line.
The silence that followed the phone call was heavier than the one before it. Arthur sat at his kitchen table, the glowing screen of his smartphone reflecting in his tired eyes. He felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. He had done it. He had saved Leo. The confirmation message from his banking app blinked once before he cleared the notification. Transfer successful. The next morning, Arthur drove to his local bank branch. He wasn't there to complain. He was there to move a small amount of money from his savings to his checking account to cover his monthly utility bills. He walked up to the teller, a young woman named Sarah who had helped him for years. "Good morning, Arthur," she said with a bright smile. "How are the grandkids?" "Doing well, Sarah. Just a bit of a scare yesterday, but everything is handled now." Arthur replied, sliding his debit card across the counter. "I just need to transfer $500 into my checking." Sarah tapped at her keyboard, her smile slowly fading into a frown. She squinted at the monitor, then looked back at Arthur. "Arthur, which account did you want to pull from?" "The savings, the one I've had since the factory closed." Sarah bit her lip. "Arthur, I'm looking at your savings account right now. The balance it's nearly zero. There was a large external wire transfer late yesterday afternoon, $15,000. The blood drained from Arthur's face. The bustling noise of the bank, the counting of coins, the muffled conversations, the hum of the air conditioner suddenly went silent. He felt a cold sweat prickle at his hairline. No, that was for the lawyer, for Leo's bail. It was an emergency. "A lawyer?" Sarah leaned forward, her voice dropping to a concerned whisper. "Arthur, we've seen a lot of these calls lately. Did you speak to Leo directly, on his own number?" Arthur pulled out his phone with trembling fingers. He dialed his real number, the one saved under Leo with a heart emoji. It rang twice. "Hey, Grandpa," Leo's voice came through, clear, vibrant, and perfectly healthy. "I was just about to call you. I just finished my midterms. What's up?" Arthur couldn't speak. He gripped the edge of the marble counter as the room began to tilt. The accident, the jail, the lawyer, it was all a ghost story. He hadn't saved his grandson. He had handed his life's security to a stranger in a headset. He was a scam victim, and his life savings were gone.
The drive home from the bank was a blur of gray asphalt and ringing silence. Arthur sat in his parked car for 20 minutes, staring at the chipped paint on his garage door. His phone buzzed in the cup holder, a text from his daughter, Leo's mother, asking if he wanted to come over for Sunday dinner. He couldn't bring himself to unlock the screen. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on his chest until every breath felt shallow. How could he have been so foolish? He was a man who had worked 40 years in a steel mill. He was supposed to be the family's rock, the one who gave advice, not the one who fell for a ghost story. He felt a deep sense of humiliation, a word that tasted like ash in his mouth. Inside the house, every object seemed to mock him. The wooden clock on the mantel was a gift he'd bought with a bonus 10 years ago. The sturdy recliner, the television, everything was paid for with the savings that were now sitting in a digital wallet halfway across the world. He felt like an intruder in his own home. He realized that the hackers hadn't just stolen his money, they had stolen his autonomy. He picked up the phone to call his daughter 3 times, and 3 times he set it back down. He could already hear the pity in her voice. "Oh, Dad, how could you? We told you to be careful online." He imagined the family meetings where they would discuss whether he was still fit to live alone or if he needed someone to manage his checkbook. To Arthur, losing his money was devastating, but losing his children's respect felt like a second, deeper robbery. He spent the evening in the dark, watching the shadows of passing cars stretch across the living room wall. He was trapped in a social dilemma: speak up and face the judgment, or stay silent and let the predators win. The silence in the house felt heavy, filled with the things he was afraid to say. He was grieving a loss that no one else knew about yet, struggling with the weight of silence that follows a betrayal of trust. The sun rose on a Wednesday morning, but the light felt intrusive. Arthur hadn't slept. He realized that staying silent was exactly what the scammers wanted. They relied on their victims feeling too ashamed to fight back. He took a long, deep breath and reached for a yellow legal pad. It was time to stop being a victim and start being a witness. His first stop was the local police precinct.
Sitting in the cold, plastic chair of the waiting room, Arthur felt a wave of anxiety. When the officer, a young man with a tired but kind face, called him into the small office, Arthur didn't lead with his shame, he led with the facts. He had prepared a chronological list of events, the time of the call, the phone number used, and the exact amount transferred. "I know the chances of getting the money back are slim," Arthur said, his voice surprisingly firm. "But I want this on the record. I want to make sure they have a harder time doing this to the next person." The officer nodded, typing quickly. "You'd be surprised, Arthur. Every piece of data helps us map these networks. Reporting this is an act of courage, not a sign of weakness." After leaving the station with a formal case number, Arthur headed back to the bank. This time, he didn't go to the teller line. He requested a private meeting with the branch manager. They sat in a glass-walled office discussing the fraudulent wire transfer. They placed a freeze on his remaining accounts and issued him a new debit card with enhanced security features. The most difficult first step remained. Standing in his kitchen, Arthur finally called his daughter. "Claire," he said when she answered, "I need to tell you something. I've had a very difficult experience, and I need your support. I was targeted by a scammer." As he explained the situation, the weight on his chest didn't disappear entirely, but it shifted. By sharing the burden, he was reclaiming his power. He was no longer hiding in the shadows. He was standing in the light of the truth, ready to navigate the long road to recovery.
Knowledge is the best defense, but for Arthur, the digital world felt like a minefield. To move forward, he had to transform his home from a vulnerable target into a digital fortress. He invited his grandson, Leo, over, not as a victim seeking pity, but as a student seeking a teacher. They sat side by side at the kitchen table, the same place where the scam had begun. Leo opened Arthur's laptop and began to explain the anatomy of a social engineering attack. "They didn't hack your computer, Grandpa," Leo explained gently. "They hacked your emotions. They used urgency and fear to bypass your logic." Together, they went through a checklist of digital hygiene. First, they set up multi-factor authentication, or MFA, on all of Arthur's sensitive accounts. Now, even if a hacker stole his password, they would need a secondary code sent directly to Arthur's physical phone to get in. Arthur practiced the process until the extra step felt like a habit rather than a hurdle. Next, Leo taught him how to scrutinize digital communications. They looked at phishing emails, messages designed to look like they came from the bank or the government. "Look at the sender's address," Leo pointed out. "If it says https://www.google.com/searchq=supportbanksecurity123.com instead of the official bank website, it's a red flag." Arthur took meticulous notes. He learned that a legitimate organization would never pressure him to pay via gift cards, wire transfers, or cryptocurrency. He created a verification protocol for himself. If he received a suspicious call, he would hang up, wait 60 seconds, and then call the official number on the back of his bank card. By the end of the afternoon, the fear that had paralyzed Arthur began to fade. He realized that technology wasn't his enemy. It was a tool that required a new set of skills. He was no longer a defenseless target. He was an informed user building a wall of security that no voice from the past could easily break through again. While the digital locks were now in place, the emotional locks remained. Arthur and Leo sat in the living room. The laptop finally closed. The air felt lighter, yet there was a lingering tension. For Arthur, the hardest part wasn't just losing the money. It was the fact that a stranger had used Leo's identity as a weapon. "I'm sorry, Leo," Arthur said softly, tracing the pattern on his armchair.
I feel like I failed you by believing you were in such a mess. I should have known you better." Leo shook his head, leaning forward. "Grandpa, you didn't fail me. You acted out of love. That's what they exploited. They took your best quality, your generosity, and turned it against you." They began a transparent conversation about the imposter scam. Leo explained that hackers often scrape social media to find names, locations, and even voice samples to make their lies more convincing. It was a sobering realization for Arthur. He learned that his private life wasn't as private as he had thought. "We need a family code word," Leo suggested, "something only we know. If there's ever a real emergency and I'm calling from a strange phone, I'll say the word. If the caller doesn't know it, hang up immediately." They spent the hour talking not just about the scam, but about their lives. Arthur realized that in his fear of being judged, he had almost pushed away the very people he wanted to protect. By opening up, he found that his relationship with Leo had actually strengthened. The hard conversation shifted from a dialogue about fraud to a profound lesson in resilience and family bonds. Arthur understood now that while a bank account can be emptied, his value as a grandfather wasn't tied to a balance sheet. He was still the man who would do anything for his family, but now he would do it with his eyes wide open. Isolation is a scammer's greatest ally, but Arthur was done being alone. At the suggestion of the police officer, he attended a meeting at the local community center called Silver Safely. Walking into the room, Arthur expected to see a group of broken people. Instead, he found a bustling circle of men and women drinking coffee and sharing stories. The atmosphere wasn't one of mourning, it was one of collective strength. A woman named Maria stood up and described how she had lost $5,000 to a lottery scam. "The hardest part wasn't the money," Maria told the group. "It was the feeling that I had lost my edge. I felt like the world had moved on and left me behind." Arthur found himself nodding vigorously. When it was his turn to speak, his voice caught in his throat for a moment, but he pushed through. He told them about the grandson call and the hollow feeling in his stomach at the bank. As he spoke, he saw eyes filled with empathy, not judgment. He realized that his story wasn't a source of shame, it was a valuable piece of evidence for others. The group leader, a retired detective, handed out a scam map of the local area. They discussed neighbor spoofing, when hackers make a call look like it's coming from a local area code, and the romance scams that target lonely hearts. By the end of the meeting, Arthur didn't just feel like a victim, he felt like part of a support circle. He exchanged phone numbers with Maria and a man named George. They promised to call one another if they ever received a suspicious message. Arthur left the community center with a stack of brochures and a renewed sense of purpose. He had found his tribe, and together they were turning their individual vulnerabilities into a powerful community shield. Recovery is rarely a straight line, and for Arthur, the legal hurdles proved to be the most frustrating part of the journey. He had hoped for a cinematic ending where the hackers were caught in a dramatic raid and his money was returned within days. The reality was much slower and dictated by a complex web of jurisdiction and international banking laws. He spent hours on the phone with the Cybercrime Task Force. He learned that his $15,000 hadn't just disappeared, it had been bounced through multiple Money Mule accounts across 3 different continents. The detective explained that because the money had been converted into cryptocurrency almost immediately, it was nearly impossible to trace. "It feels like I'm fighting a ghost," Arthur told his daughter one afternoon, surrounded by folders of bank statements and police reports. He had to navigate a mountain of bureaucracy. He filled out Form 14039 for the IRS to protect his identity from tax fraud.
He spent a morning at the Social Security office, ensuring his benefits weren't compromised. Each form felt like a reminder of the day he lost control, but he forced himself to be persistent. He realized that the legal system wasn't built for speed, it was built for documentation. Even when the bank officially denied his claim for a refund, stating that he had authorized the transfer himself, Arthur didn't give up. He filed an appeal with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He learned the importance of being his own advocate. Through these hurdles, Arthur discovered a hidden strength. He became organized, methodical, and fluent in the language of legal protection. He wasn't just waiting for a miracle anymore. He was working the process. The money might never come back in full, but Arthur was reclaiming his dignity by refusing to be ignored by the system.
Life in Arthur's house had a different rhythm now. The frantic energy of the initial crisis had settled into what he called the new routine. It wasn't a life lived in fear, but one lived with a healthy level of skepticism. His phone no longer sat on the kitchen table like a loaded weapon. Instead, Arthur had set it to silence unknown callers. Now, if a number wasn't in his contacts, it went straight to voicemail. If it's important, he told himself, they'll leave a message and I'll call them back on my own terms. This simple change gave him back his peace of mind. His morning coffee was now accompanied by a quick scan of a cybersecurity blog he had bookmarked. He stayed informed about the latest trends in fraud, from AI voice cloning to fake package delivery alerts. He treated this information like the weather report, something to be aware of so he could dress accordingly. He had transitioned from being a target to being a gatekeeper of his own life. Arthur also became a master of the pause. Whenever an email arrived with a sense of urgency, a subject line shouting "account suspended" or "immediate action required," he would step away from the computer. He would take a walk or tend to his garden. He knew that scammers relied on a high-stress environment to cloud a person's judgment. By forcing a delay, he regained his logical edge. He even helped his friends at the park set up emergency contacts on their devices. He taught them the protocol: never give out personal information over the phone, and never click a link in a text message. He saw his friends' confidence grow, and in turn, his own sense of shame began to dissolve. The new routine wasn't just about cybersecurity software or complex passwords. It was about a fundamental shift in mindset. Arthur had accepted that the world contained predators, but he had also proved that he had the tools to outsmart them. He was no longer looking over his shoulder. He was looking straight ahead, grounded in his new, hard-won vigilance.
The transformation was complete. Arthur no longer saw himself as a victim of a crime, but as a survivor with a mission. He realized that his experience, as painful as it was, had given him a unique set of tools that others desperately needed. He decided it was time for turning pain into power. He approached the director of the local senior center with a proposal, a weekly workshop called The Secure Senior. He didn't use a script or a formal presentation. Instead, he sat at the front of the room and told his story, the real, unvarnished truth. He spoke about the shaking in his hands, the hollow feeling at the bank, and the weight of silence he had carried. By being vulnerable, he gave everyone else in the room permission to be honest about their own fears. The workshop became a massive success. Arthur taught his peers how to spot red flags and helped them install security apps on their phones. He became a local advocate, even speaking at a city council meeting about the need for better digital literacy programs for the elderly. He worked with the local police to distribute scam prevention stickers that people could place right next to their landline phones.
One afternoon, a man approached Arthur after a session. He was tearful and admitted he had almost sent money to a fake prize scam the day before, but he remembered Arthur's voice in his head telling him to take a pause. In that moment, Arthur felt a sense of fulfillment that outweighed the loss of his savings. He hadn't just saved someone else's money, he had saved their dignity. As Arthur walked home that evening, he looked at his house. It was still the same quiet home, but the air inside felt different. The $15,000 were gone, but they had been replaced by a new sense of purpose. He had turned a moment of absolute weakness into a legacy of strength. He was a teacher, a protector, and a leader. Arthur had finally closed the chapter on his loss and opened a new one on his contribution to the world. Arthur's journey reminds us that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. He lost his savings, but he found a new purpose. He turned his silence into a voice that now protects an entire community. We covered a lot of survival English today, from phishing to vigilance. If you found these terms helpful, make sure to check the description box for a full list of the vocabulary used in Arthur's story. Learning these words isn't just about passing a test, it's about navigating the real world with confidence. And don't forget also to answer the questions in the quiz section below the description box and tell me your score in the comments. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever received a suspicious call or message? How did you handle it? Let's share our experiences in the comments to help keep each other safe. Your story might be the red flag someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to like this video if you learned something new and subscribe to Glisso for more stories that bridge the gap between real life and English mastery. I'll see you in the next story.